Of all the conspiracies to have arisen over the years, the Paul is dead theory has to be one of the most bizarre. The basic theory goes that Paul McCartney died in a car crash in 1966 and was replaced with a double. A double being a session musician by the name William Shears, or Billy Shears, first introduced on Sgt. Pepper's. The reasoning for this was simple. The band at the time were a cultural, musical and financial powerhouse. Merchandise, record sales, millions in royalties. Basically, the show had to go on. But for some reason, whether through conscience or guilt over the deception, the remaining members put numerous hints about Paul's death on their album covers and lyrics. In short, the Sir Paul McCartney we know today is not the same Paul from Beatlemania. It's a different bloke. And no, that's not a metaphor. Do a DNA or fingerprint test and you'll get different results. This video intends to be a complete analysis of all data on this subject, which, as I've learnt, is one of the deepest, most bizarre rabbit holes that gets more and more bizarre the deeper you go. So let's get to it. Firstly, Paul McCartney had a very round and cherubic face, the kind of face grandma wants to kiss. At the height of Beatlemania, Paul was known as the cute one. William, by comparison, has a long, thin face, more oval than rounded. In I Am the Walrus, we hear John Lennon all but confirm this change. Corporation t-shirt, stupid bloody Tuesday, man, you've been a naughty boy, you let your face grow long. Just one of the many hints the band left which we'll be covering. We also have some very clear height discrepancies between the two McCartneys. Original Paul was more or less equal in height to the other Beatles. Later images show that Billy is a good inch taller than any of the others. John and Paul singing into the same mic was a trademark of their early shows, but after the replacement they were never to tour again. At the time the band told us that this was due to their fatigue of live performance, but the real reason may be that the height discrepancy would have been too obvious to hide. These discrepancies can be seen in numerous images, such as this image of Paul and William holding the same Hofner bass. As we can see, the bass is to scale, so why the height difference? Men generally stop growing once they reach 18, so a growth spurt of inches seems unlikely. Here he is with girlfriend Jane Asher, equal in one image and towering above her in the next. The obvious question here is, why would Asher go along with such a deception, assuming it's Paul she loved and not William? A more apt question might be whether it was Paul she loved or simply her status as a Beatle girl, which would have been unaffected by the switch. It's no secret that the Beatles were keen enthusiasts of backwards masking, that is, putting hidden messages into their music that can only be heard when playing the song in reverse. Numerous Beatle tracks contain such messages, many of which allude to Paul being gone, missing or dead in some capacity. We hear Lennon confess this technique in Strawberry Fields. The Sgt. Pepper's cover is full of Paul is dead symbolism. The design itself is said to be a funeral. On the grave is a left-handed bass with only 3 strings, with Paul's name subliminally encoded. Holding a mirror to the drum, we get a number in place of lonely, 111X, or 11 Roman numeral 9. The rumour being that Paul died on September the 11th. Heart becomes he die with an arrow pointing to Billy. Put together, we get September the 11th he die. Behind Billy's head we see the writer Stephen Crane, whose novel The Open Boat is a tale of 4 seamen who went on a voyage, one of whom died, the dead character's name being Billy. And another subliminal with the words "Here lies Paul." Hidden mirror messages can be seen on other albums. Magical Mystery Tour tells us to look, and the Love compilation hints at use of a code. Of course, this all has the sense of finding meaning in anything, like New Age's belief that 1111 on a clock means something other than the time. But as mentioned, this is a deep and bizarre rabbit hole. One coincidence can easily be wrote off, but 100 coincidences not so much. And what we're dealing with the Paul is dead theory is hundreds of coincidences. For instance, We have numerous instances of Paul being in some way singled out from the other Beatles. For example, the only member with his back to us on the back of Sgt. Pepper, being the only member with a red background on Let It Be, an extinguished candle on the Very Together compilation, which, being the second candle from the left, mirrors the position of Billy on Abbey Road. The extinguished candle itself is a very strange choice of symbolism and was released before Lennon's death. Being the only member wearing a black carnation in the Mother Should Know video. From Magical Mystery Tour, the only member dressed in black. Admittedly, we can't see that it's Paul, but we do know it's a walrus. And as John sings in the song Glass Onion off the White Album,
well, here's another clue for you all. The walrus was Paul.
The walrus was Paul. In the Free as a Bird video, we see a crashed car surrounded by dozens of young girls in mourning, the legend being that Paul was killed in a car crash due to severe head trauma.
He blew his mind out in a car.
Another shot from this video shows the band all dressed in black, save for Paul, who's in red. Red, of course, having the blood connotation. Inverting the colours on Sgt. Pepper's, we get another standout Paul, again in red. And if we recall the drum message, 111X could simply be 4 ones representing the band, with one of them crossed out. We also have numerous instances or allusions to 3 Beatles. For example, 3 strings on Paul's bass on the Peppers cover, a subliminal 3 in the Abbey Road bushes, and on the back, if we do this little dot to dot puzzle, we get 3 Beatles, 1 skull. 3 Beatles on Sir George Martin's coat of arms, the band's legendary producer, and from George Harrison himself.
This is actually a Beatle wife fixing the tea for one of the Fab 4 ex-Beatles. Fab 3.
The Abbey Road cover is said to be a funeral procession, with John as the priest dressed in white, Ringo in black as the funeral director, a shoeless Paul being the corpse, and a blue-collared George as the grave digger. A white Beatle car is seen with the licence plate 28 if, implying Paul would be in his 28th year if he was alive. Paul is again singled out by being the only member without shoes, as is custom for burial tradition, and being out of step with the others. The consistency of Paul being singled out applies to numerous instances in which we find an open palm above his head, which to some cultures is a sign of benediction. Examples: on the Peppers cover. Again on Yellow Submarine, John's Masonic symbolism is clear, we'll come to that later. From Magical Mystery Tour and various other images. It's said that Billy's full name is William Shears Campbell, which is revealed to us in numerous ways. Paul's DVD concert, The Space Within Us, reveals his true name, Bill, when mirrored.
Hey, Bungalow Bill.
In the film Give My Regard to Broad Street, in which Paul plays himself, he's again addressed as William.
1, 2, 3. Okay, Jack.
You know William? Of course. Oh, great.
In this clip from a George Harrison tribute concert, we hear George's widow, Olivia, explicitly address Paul by the name Billy.
Hello, excuse me, I've got to say hello to my friends.
Hello.
You all right?
In the 1988 documentary Imagine, we hear John and George refer to a Beatle Bill, with George's snide remark on the Fab 3 implying Billy was not one of them.
See Beatle Bill making a pig of himself.
Not doing so well these days, is he, Beatle?
Well, he's number 5 in Sweden.
Oh, in Sweden, that's it.
Fab 3.
Fab 3.
We can assume that in the higher levels of entertainment, Sir Paul's true identity is common knowledge.
But you, I was going to say, you do a fantastic Paul McCartney. You are really one of the best Paul McCartney impersonator, I mean, ever. Well,
we have Denny Lane of the Moody Blues.
What was it like playing with Billy Shepherd instead of fucking Paul McCartney?
Who's Billy Shepherd?
I don't know.
Billy Shears.
Ah! Billy Shears Campbell. Thank you. That's all you had to say, my friend.
A Freudian slip from actor Dana Carvey.
It's kind of like when I met Paul McCartney, and I said, you know that lyric in the chorus, one day we'll stand up on top of the mountain with our flag unfurled, but it won't be soon enough. And he just lit up. He just lit up. Oh, that was a song, you know, I just pictured a big flag, you know, up on the top of a mountain, you know. And then that was it. That was it. We were fast friends after that. So I think with Billy, people like it if you take one of his obscure songs or obscure album and be very...
And again from John Lennon.
Oh yeah? Yeah. They just start doing that.
And we'll do part 2 on the backside with Billy and us just on low.
Just an instrumental.
Yeah.
Do it. Oh, I'm easy, lad.
With all this in mind, the McCartney composition I Will off the White Album takes on a new meaning with the addition of a simple comma. And we're again reminded of Billy, the dead seaman from Stephen Crane's novel. Whoever Bill is seems to be a recurring character in the band's mythos. He's even got the name printed on his double bass. Clearly, the Beatles had a propensity for subliminals and wordplay. For example, in the Yellow Submarine movie, we see a tombstone with the words "Here lie buried 49", Paul having 4 letters, McCartney having 9. The tombstone in the Free as a Bird video reads 12th of September, a day after McCartney died. And some Paul is Deaders believe that if you blur your eyes just a little, you can make out the silhouette of a left-handed bass player. Blurred stills from Magical Mystery Tour show images of skulls, "Rest in peace", and the words "I was beneath the imposter". From Strawberry Fields we get numerous close-ups of Billy anytime John sings "Nothing is real".
Nothing is real. Nothing is real. Nothing is real.
On the Anthology 3 compilation, we see a mashup of the Let It Be cover, only in place of Billy we have an image of the original Paul from Rubber Soul, literally covering up the deception. The Beatles publishing company, Apple Corps, if you want to get cute with wordplay, might easily read Apple Corps. The Collection of Oldies compilation, if you swap the O and L for the next letters in the alphabet, we get PM Dies. Again, more cute than incriminatory, but it's no secret that you won't get anywhere in music unless you're in the Freemasonic Old Boys network. Watch any Madonna live show and you could be mistaken for watching a satanic ritual. Watch a Sam Smith performance and you'll be left with no doubt. Freemasonic tradition likes to rub their symbolism in our faces, safe in the knowledge that we're too stupid and powerless to do anything about it. Billy's Ram album is classic in this regard, as the ram is traditionally the sign of Baphomet, the official sign of the Church of Satan. We might not consciously register it, but the subliminal is there. The Beatles' Butcher album shows a totally normal bunch of decapitated babies covered in blood, totally normal for a 1960s pop record. Here again on Yellow Submarine, John with the devil horns and Billy with the 666. More ram symbolism can be seen on Billy's Percy Thrillington album. And again on Egypt Station, along with everyone's favourite de facto Illuminati symbol, the Eye of Providence. Of course, this doesn't suggest that the Beatles were secretly devil worshippers, but the music industry undoubtedly has a fetish for the occult. If you think all this is merely paranoia, then you haven't been paying attention. Another oddity on the Ram album is the word Lily on the right hand side. We also see it very clearly in this clip of Billy talking about hidden things for fans.
Just came up with more and more ideas. I thought, okay, on the menus, let's have little hidden things for fans. Little hidden things for fans.
The significance of the word Lily is that when we apply the mirror trick, we get 111X, the recurring numeral of Paul's death. We see it again in Billy's No More Lonely Nights video. The reaction people have of this very outlandish theory is to write it all off as, well, there's only ever been one Paul McCartney. But what most people remember as Paul McCartney is actually William Shears. Because if McCartney died in '66, then we have a relatively short archive of footage, 6 years at most compared to William Shears' 6 decades worth of photos, videos, interviews, concerts, etc. Archive footage of the original Paul is scant in comparison, but spend enough time comparing the two and the differences cannot be unseen. This is Paul McCartney, this is William Shears. It's all in the shape of the head. In July 2009, forensic studies of McCartney's facial structure were compared with those of the supposed double. The study, performed by Italian researchers, intended to put rest the ridiculous conspiracy once and for all. However, instead of putting an end to the theory, their analysis to their dismay added credibility to it. For example, curve of the jaw, tragus of the ear, teeth position, Billy's more oblong skull were just some of the discrepancies the researchers found. The biggest red flag was in the upper palate, which could have only been widened as it was in Shears, with extensive surgery involving breaking the bone in the roof of the mouth. This bloody and painful operation would have put McCartney out of action as a singer and consigned him to an orthodontic brace for months. A full analysis of this study can be found by searching Wired Italian McCartney, and this is an abridged summary at best, but this simple Occam's razor makes a double the more likely scenario. The idea of using a double for someone very famous is not so strange when you consider that the current US President, Joe Biden, makes use of them. Unless he's able to sever and reattach his earlobes at will, then clearly it's working with no one the wiser. Also, if Biden can use a double in an age where every photo can be scrutinised via the internet and still get away with it, then doing so in 1966 would have been all the more easier. When you factor in all the historical events we've been lied to about, 9/11, the moon landings, and let's not even start on the Holocaust, replacing a famous singer is relatively simple. But the anomalies don't stop there. For instance, William and his daughter Heather each bear the condition polydactyly, which is being born with extra fingers or toes. In Billy's case, it's a 6th toe on each foot. The original Paul clearly had 5 toes on his left foot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but on Billy's we have 6. Despite the old images we're working with here, there's clearly some kind of abnormality on Billy's left foot that McCartney did not have. This particular image shows an unusually large gap where a toe should be. Was it airbrushed out? Did he have it surgically removed? Does Paul have 5 toes and this whole thing's a load of nonsense? Who knows? All we're trying to do here is make an objective analysis of all data. If there's enough to fill numerous books on the subject, then it's worth a serious look. What we don't want to do is blindly accept whatever authority tells us, because that would be stupid. The earlobes likewise are an odd match. As we see, McCartney's were attached midway, while Billy's are free. If we look closely at this image, whatever the hell this is not natural. Clearly some kind of prosthetic was used along with various other gimmicks like wigs and fake moustaches. After the Beatles split, each went on to have solo careers, Billy included. A number of his solo work seems to reference 2 Pauls. For instance, here on McCartney 2, aside from the name itself, we see 2 shadows implying a split personality. Here again on Besides Himself, and again on Twin Freaks, one face long, the other round. My Ever-Present Past, Wonderful Christmas Time and Pipes of Peace are just some of Billy's music videos featuring 2 versions of himself. At a stretch, the 2 guitar holes on Billy's coat of arms could imply doubles, or be an homage to the original Paul.
There are 2 Paul McCartneys.
Those weeks was right when they said you was there.
The Beatles from Sgt. Pepper onward were basically a different band, with a clear difference in dynamic. The pre-66 Beatles were clearly the best of friends, always playful and always ready with a cheeky quip. From 66 onward, however, there's a distinct somberness and alienation that can be seen in their videos of the time. John in particular looks to have aged by 40 years.
You see, a big change happened in 1966.
Something happened to the band in 1966 that changed their trajectory from cheeky young lads to timid recluses. Did the pressures of fame and drug intake play a part? Sure, but what if carrying the burden of a great deception, lying to the world and having to pretend a stranger was their best friend also played a part? From September 66 onward, interviews the band gave as a group took a dramatic drop in an apparent effort to avoid appearing together in public. Also, part of the band's charm was always dressing in the same suits, but this too was dropped from 66 on, along with an overhaul of their style, image and sound. Gone were the mop-top hairdos and screaming girls, in were the spaced out hippies. These two phases were essentially the Paul and Billy years, which are again seen on Sgt. Pepper's. But the message being conveyed is that the Paul years are gone. The new member Billy is here to stay, and the band make sure to tell us on the opening track.
So let me introduce to you the one and only Billy Shears, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Additionally, the two Pauls have totally different mannerisms. Paul had an unmistakable stage presence. He always had a chirpy smile and would bounce his head from side to side in a very specific trademark manoeuvre. In terms of bass playing style, he rarely needed to look at the fretboard, maybe once or twice per verse. Billy's playing in comparison is more generic. Gone are the little head bops and he frequently looks to the fretboard. At a stretch, even the height of the bass differed. Billy is more a hit player, while Paul kept his bass more across the navel. Overall, Paul had an adorable quality that Billy simply doesn't. There is another theory that suggests Paul didn't die, but simply retired, preferring a quiet life over the pressure of being a Beatle. If that were the case, what became of him, and is he still alive today? Some suggest that the former custodian of the McCartney home, John Halliday, is actually the original Paul. Facial profiles show a near identical match. Halliday has the rounded cherubic features and a facial mole in the exact same spot. It's also been suggested that the two Pauls in the Pipes of Peace video is actually Paul and Billy together. As we see, Paul on the left has that round chipmunk grin, while Billy on the right has that gaunt and gangly look. In any case, replacing Paul McCartney might have only intended to be a temporary ruse, but perhaps it reached a point where to confess that ruse would have done enormous damage to the British establishment, so they went with it. 6 decades on, it still remains the biggest kept secret in music, and Billy Shears probably pinches himself every day he got away with it.
I do, I always sort of think they shouldn't be paying me this money. I'm not him. I'm some little kid masquerading as this guy who is like the famous guy.
In 2021, the Memoirs of Billy Shears was published, which is Shears' biography confessing to being Paul's replacement. What's odd is that it's forwarded by Gregory Paul Martin, son of legendary Beatles producer Sir George Martin. Why would the son choose to be involved in such a project? Liberal use of the Beatles' names and associates invites a host of legal issues unless some of it is true. I've read the book and frankly there's better Paul is Dead books out there, like Nick Collestrom's Life and Death of McCartney, but for the son of Sir George Martin to vouch for the book gives the theory more weight than what conspiracy nerds like me can offer. Who knows, maybe Sir Paul longs for the truth to come out, but acknowledges that the fallout would be too great. It's like, hey, the biggest band on the planet? Yeah, they weren't actually real. The implications of such a thing being disclosed would be enormous. But we have to give credit where it's due. William Shears proved himself to be a worthy replacement, and it may be that without his inclusion, the Beatles would have spent the remainder of their career recycling the same boy-girl love songs that defined their early years. So, is Paul McCartney the world's most successful musician, or has he been dead for 60 years? Well, spend enough time comparing the two, the mannerisms, the change in band dynamic, lyrics, hidden messages, etc. It's not so much a question of how could they do this without anyone noticing, but more a question of how did we ever miss it. In any case, it's clear that the Paul is Dead mythos is an enduring legend that shows no sign of going away.
We'll